Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Super excited to be joined by Peter Ryan, who is the founder and principal analyst of Ryan Strategic Advisory. And BPESA was excited when Peter made himself available, considering all of the global travels that you've been on recently, Peter. Month of April is a big month for the CX community. That is the month that your annual Omnibus research survey comes out, which identifies what's happening in the world of CX. And of course, from a South Africa perspective, we're always keen to see what is happening with our offshore locations. So welcome, Peter, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much. Great to be back and great to be speaking to all members of the South African outsourcing and CX ecosystem.
Fantastic. Pete, you have again shared with us quite a robust report. I think there's about 106 pages in the report this year with a lot of information. I just wanted to spend a few minutes with you just to unpack some of the findings that you pulled out from this year's report. Maybe I think to start off, let's just let the audience know the compilation of the research. How do you go about that? Where do the respondents emanate from?
So the respondents are CX enterprise decision makers. Now, Trace, I think the important thing to distinguish here is that these are people from the captive side. So these are people who are either existing clients of outsourcers or potential ones. Equally speaking, the individuals that answer the survey have to do so on the basis that they themselves are pulling the strategic levers for CX within their respective organizations. And the example I always like to give to differentiate would be, we're not talking about a regional telco contact center manager in Akron, Ohio, or in Kansas City, Missouri. Nothing against those people, but it's going to be the people who are actually running CX for that telco nationally or on a regional basis.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Peter. I know that there were some new countries from a CX perspective that responded this year, some interesting ones. Do you want to let us know a little bit about that?
So one of the things that we try to do at Ryan Strategic Advisory with the Omnibus survey each year is to get the fullest possible flavor for what enterprise contact center decision makers are thinking about. Now, what that means is that we can't be solely focusing on just one or two different destinations. We've got to focus on as many destinations as we possibly can in terms of demand markets. So the locations in which enterprises would be looking to procure the services of outsourcers. Now, this year, we expanded our lineup to 9 different demand markets, and that includes in Europe, we've got the United Kingdom, we've got France, Germany, Italy, Spain. In terms of North America, we have the US and Canada. We looked at Australia as well, and we added Japan this year. So that was our 9th one. So we've gone from 8 to 9, and we did 712 individual respondents, making this, to our knowledge, the largest single buyer survey for CX services in the world.
That's fantastic, Peter. Thank you. I must admit, I was quite intrigued when you mentioned that Japan had come in, and I wasn't sure what we were going to learn from that, but it seems to be quite a bit. So yeah, really exciting there. So if we take a step back and take a bird's eye view, if you have a big look at what you saw as the big differences, trends, outcomes that came through from 2022 through to 2023. To be fair, it's only 12 months, but things are happening at a rate of knots at the moment, struggling to keep up. So what were the big standouts for you as the differences between 22 and 23?
Probably for me, the biggest standout was the extent to which enterprises and enterprise CX departments specifically are going to be facing a cash crunch. You know, we always get a sense when we do the survey that this particular year, there could be some flexibility budget-wise, but respondents tend to be very pessimistic about the following calendar year. And we always look 2 years out in terms of the horizon. This year, the optimism was very limited for 2023 and investment flexibility, and it doesn't look any better for 2024. One of the things that I've been picking up on is that this recession talk that's been going on for quite some time is definitely having an impact on enterprise CX budgets. What that means is, whether we see a recession or not, that enterprise decision makers are going to be constrained when they need to, or they have to, invest in technology and people and processes.
Yeah, which I suppose if we just pause on that point for a moment, if that's the biggest takeout that you saw coming through, is a bit of a concern for the customer, actually. if these enterprises are not going to be investing in technologies that customers are expecting. Not good for the customer, but potentially good for the BPO market.
Potentially, I would suggest that the BPOs themselves are going to need to come to the table with offerings and solutions that are going to permit enterprises that are facing this cash crunch to really be able to segue very quickly to a partner that's going to be able to provide the processes, the people, and the technology. The reality is that cost and value are going to be important things when it comes to any type of an outsourcing offering. But also one of the key things is quality. And this is something that we see time and time again in this survey, that the buyers are prioritizing organizations that are not going to do your mess for less. They're going to prioritize the ones that can certainly drive value, but do so in a quality manner.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, just pausing on that point there, Pete, the customer has matured significantly. Their expectations from a service perspective have definitely increased. So quality is absolutely critical. And hopefully any of these enterprises that do choose to mitigate any cash crunch risks or budget risks and look at outsourcing, do so, like you say, for the right reasons, and outsource for quality. Not obviously there will be a certain level of cost saving, but outsource for that quality, because given where the consumer is as well, with the current financial crisis that's sort of hanging on the horizon, if not, living with us already, and the cost of living that we're all kind of struggling with a little bit, and I mean, it's global, that customer's opportunity to attrit is that much higher than what it used to be. So it is that much more important for brands to make sure that they really are looking after their customers at this point in time.
Without a doubt.
We dove in a little bit there. One of the other things that I saw coming through from a captive community perspective, one of their biggest concerns, besides the budget piece, which I know stood high up on the table there, is looking at information security and data security.
Yeah.
Do you want to unpack that a little bit?
Look, I don't think there's any day or any week that goes by where there's not some type of a high profile information security hack that's announced in the media. And one of the things that the captive contact centers are very conscious of is the extent to which they're housing personal information of consumers, and the extent to which these consumers and their information are vulnerable, whether it's from cyber fraud, whether it's from actual humans in the contact center environment that might be looking to try and fish out certain pieces of information. This is very much on, I would say, it's very much on the radar, but like at the top of the radar, at the top of the playlist, really, when you're thinking a little bit about what organizations are concerned about, what keeps the operator of a contact center or CX operations up at night, it's going to be information security, and making sure that the information security provisions, the data protection that's in place, is going to be as watertight as possible. And given the fact that every time there's some type of a solution that comes out to solve an InfoSec problem, the hackers and the bad actors just seem to get better and they get around it. And it's going to be a vicious circle. It's going to be a spiral, but it's one that's not going away. And I'm not surprised to see data protection and information security once again one of the primordial elements that individuals are thinking about going into 2023 from a CX angle.
And interesting, that was consistent against your respondents and the countries that responded.
Yeah.
That was consistently number one. Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
Keep our eyes on. Besides data security and budget, were there any other key pain points that the captive CX operations sort of stood out with that would be of interest to us?
Yeah, I think agent management's got to be a huge one. We all know that there is a labor crunch in every different demand market that we looked at in this survey. The reality is that since the COVID pandemic, we have not seen the labor force come back to what it was. Individuals have left the labor force, and even small percentages can have a big impact, and they have a big multiplier in terms of CX operations. And I think, to my mind, that is a very important factor that does stand out: agent recruitment and agent retention. managing agent training, making sure that the training is going to be as robust as possible. And when you factor all these things together, Trace, what it says to me is that any outsourcer that's going to be able to compete effectively for renewing captive contracts or new captive business are going to have to come to the table with a very proactive agent management solution, one that ensures finding the best people and retaining those people and making sure that they're trained up in the most up-to-date methods as possible to ensure the best outcomes.
It's always so interesting when we have this discussion with the global, from a South African perspective, we refer to as the source markets, where the buyers reside. And when the discussion comes in about having a shortage of agent skills, agent labor, wanting to work in the global business services, CX, BPO space. If we look at, and we'll get to it in a moment, but many of the offshore locations that are pitching and promoting and selling themselves as a supply market for these very source markets, with South Africa as an example, sitting with over 60% youth unemployment, this abundance of phenomenal skill, the English-speaking abilities to service many of the source markets that you've mentioned, it always sort of baffles my brain where I sit here going, we have such a need for the job opportunities and such an enthusiastic willingness to want to take on the career of being a call center agent and moving up the ranks within the environment. So it's a challenge for many of the countries and many of the operations situated in those countries. However, I'm saying there's many offshore locations like South Africa that have the solution for them, actually.
That's it.
So happy marriages in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly.
So having a look at what these pain points are, you've already highlighted a few points, and I don't know if there's anything that you want to add. If we speak to our offshore BPO community, or any BPOs actually, besides the areas that you've mentioned about focusing in on agent retention, looking for the right skills, how to really hone them and ensure that those skills are remaining with you and retaining the IP, having a look at key areas like data security, what are the other standout points for BPOs to consider to make themselves appealing for that potential client community?
Probably a very important one, I would say, is looking at service levels. Probably a point that stood out for me. This is another one. It's a question that we haven't asked before in the survey, but I thought, given all the chatter about how customer service is supposed to be going down everywhere, and we've seen some evidence of that. I believe the most recent UK customer service index was released yesterday, and it's abysmal. It's the same phenomenon happening in the US and many other sourcing markets. You know, let's find out from the captives how they feel they're doing on service levels. And if you take a look at the question that we asked in the results, the data shows that roughly 25%, so a quarter of enterprises, a quarter of the 712 that we spoke to, feel that there's been any improvement over the course of the past 12 months. Now, what that means is that the bulk of them said they're either staying flat or they're going downwards in terms of the service levels they're able to deliver. So I think, you know, going back to a quote that I once heard, Trace, and that was, if you're just standing still, you're going backwards when it comes to business. And I tend to agree. And I just actually remember where I heard that quote from. It was Veronica Lodge on an episode of Riverdale that I'm actually very embarrassed to say on this broadcast, but I'll say it anyway. I've got a lot of friends in South Africa. They understand. Look, the bottom line is any provider, any outsourcer that's going to the table and wants to try and bring a good solution that's going to be sought after by buyers, it's going to need to focus on quality of service and raising those service levels. Because as you said, it's very easy for a consumer to attrit. And I heard a great podcast from a mutual friend, David Powers, on Caffeinated CX today when I was flying out to Toronto, where I am right now. And the comment he was making was, we all know service levels are bad. Decision makers know service levels are bad. No one's doing anything about it. This is a chance for them to do it. All the outsourcer has to do is just put that in front of them and say to them, you just need to work with us. We can do this for you.
So it's really looking at how you partner in a meaningful way with quality as the focus and customer as the center point of that.
Precisely.
Easy to say, put it into action, right? Pete, no conversation will be complete if we don't have a look at one of the key areas that globally enterprises are looking at. We're under budget strain. There's so many concerns that we have to look at, but at the end of the day, there is a triple bottom line, and that triple bottom line includes the social aspect. So looking at ESG, environmental, social, and governance, looking at DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and of course, from a global business services and BPO perspective, impact sourcing. How much of a play did that make? How much reference was made to that within the report? I know you sort of did ask the question, how important is that to the enterprises?
Well, I think it's very important to them. I mean, we hear a lot about some of these different elements that are being brought into the business model, and how CX can be delivered in such a manner that it's going to be inclusive, that it's going to be environmentally friendly, that it's going to be done in such a way where we can help individuals who might come from more disadvantaged backgrounds. And what I would suggest is that from the angle of what the enterprises are looking for in a BPO, a lot of these elements did resonate. And just as an example, in Canada, where I reside, as you know, there was a big propensity to try and work with organizations that were going to be able to bring a good environmentally sound contact center policy to the table. In other markets, we saw impact sourcing, and the ability to drive impact sourcing was something that organizations looking to work with BPOs would be prioritizing. I think for me, the most important thing is that as long as I've been working as an analyst in the space, and as long as more socially driven factors have become part of the equation, we've seen those socially driven factors move up the value chain when it comes to selecting a BPO operator.
No, I'm glad that it had such a play. I mean, again, from a global perspective, it is exceptionally important that business does business responsibly. And I'm very proud of the fact that we work in a sector where the focus on social impact through impact sourcing, looking at the green, looking at from an environmental perspective, from a green perspective, that our sector can actually make a meaningful difference. And we have a lot of voices in the space, and hopefully those are reaching more and more consumers and clients and shifting the way that they do business. So I'm glad that it had such a play. So Pete, if we get to sort of what everyone gets excited about, and really looking at the different offshore locations that were on the radar and stood out, there were 50 offshore locations all in all that stood out. I did some of the assessment on what we saw there, and I was very excited to see that 10 of the 50 were or are from Africa. 10 countries are from Africa within the top 50. What is your take on the emergence of Africa as an offshore destination?
It shouldn't be a surprise. Look, when we examine the history of offshore outsourcing, we've seen South Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt, I say, really quarterbacking the sector. But now there's just so many other locations that are coming to the forefront. You know, I think about the trip I made to Senegal a few years ago to see what was going on in the French language delivery market there, and it exceeded anything that I could have anticipated. We've heard some great stories about what's coming out of Rwanda right now. And Trace, I would just emphasize that Rwanda was #1 for French respondents in our survey in terms of offshore delivery points, which is a great result for a country that really is looking to try and develop a GBS market and a GBS operating environment. We're hearing a lot more about Kenya these days. I get frequent interactions with individuals from the BPO sector in Uganda. Ghana is definitely coming up as a location of choice. So I'd say pretty well everything is on the table right now. When it comes to new locations, when it comes to different destinations where work can be done in a quality fashion with value driving it, I don't see why there's any country in Africa where if the government, if industry, and individual entrepreneurs want to make a difference, they can.
Well, as an African, 100% agree. I would say one of the things that persists from an Africa perspective is the perception that many potential buyers have of Africa. And I would strongly suggest that those perceptions are actually outdated. The Africa that is now compared to the Africa that was in the media 10 years ago are two very different Africas. And I will say that from a South African perspective, if a buyer lands in South Africa or elsewhere in Africa, be it Kenya, Egypt, obviously Ethiopia is coming up, they are very pleasantly surprised. They don't realize the infrastructure that actually exists across the continent, connectivity, the motorways, highways, the buildings themselves, how the buildings are set up, and the maturity of the staff, besides the fact that very generally, people in Africa are very, very warm. They're friendly, they want to engage, and it's sort of a natural service orientation from African people. I always say I think it's because of all the sun that we have, definitely makes it for happier people, but definitely. And then, of course, there's just the natural beauty, which a lot of our clients enjoy actually coming through to see. So if somebody is thinking about offshore locations, well, number one, the top 10 of the top 50 are in Africa, and a visit, I'm sure, would not be amiss. So let us have a look. If we look at the top 10 within the 50, the top 10 offshore locations, and I have taken the ties into account because there were a number of countries that tied. 7 of those are actually in Africa. So we've gone from 10 locations out of your 50, but out of the top 10, we have 7, which is in Africa. So that just reinforces what you've actually said now. So Shakira said it's time for Africa, and I 100% agree. Apparently Peter Ryan did as well. So
I just count the numbers. I just count the numbers. It's
according to the research.
The respondents validated Shakira.
Absolutely. Pete, let's just quickly zone in on South Africa. I mean, obviously, BPESA is the National Trade Body and Industry Association. We are thrilled with a strong Africa, and our focus is on how do we help support and grow the South African community. We've got a number of phenomenal BPOs that exist in the country. We've got a phenomenal supply chain ecosystem that supports those BPOs, as well as a large domestic captive community, and then a number of captives that have actually, international captives that have set up in South Africa, with more looking actually. But if we actually unpack the numbers, the report has been running for 5 years. And as we mentioned up front, for the last 5 years, South Africa has toggled first and second position. Obviously, super excited to have come in first. I was given a call when you announced the results a few weeks ago saying, Tracy, what happened? We've dropped to second. And I said, guys, you know what? Silver's good, actually, if you consider the competition that's out there, the number of responding countries, etc. And also, I believe that South Africa was quite a close second to India, which we shared first place with last year. Do you want to maybe just unpack that a little bit, Peter?
Yeah, so I think that what we need to recognize is, as you say, that as long as we've been doing the survey, South Africa has formed part of the top 5. And that's a very prestigious club. You know, we've seen a lot of different countries come and go in that very exclusive group, but South Africa has been consistent. And I think it's been consistent in all the right ways. We saw South Africa move up over the course of the past 2 decades in terms of location of choice, especially in the English language world. And as we look at it today, the 9 countries that we sounded, South Africa was by far and away number 1 in the United States, like literally by a mile, beating India. And it was definitely a very strong number 1 in Canada. It was a very close second in Australia to India. It was also a close second in the United Kingdom to India. What it comes down to, in my opinion, is the fact that it has developed itself as a blue chip location. They always said, you know, you're never going to get fired for buying IBM. And I think that it's the same thing for South Africa. It stands out as a destination of choice with both established cities where you can do this type of work as well as up and coming ones. You know, take a look at Durban 5 years ago, wasn't even on the global map. And today it's one of the hottest cities anywhere. Johannesburg coming up very much from the scope of being a CX leading destination where individuals can find amazing talent on the ground. Again, Joburg wasn't really being talked about a decade ago. And today it's a very, very different kettle of fish. So in my view, the work that the South African CX and GBS ecosystem has done promoting the country around the world has definitely had traction, and it's been very sticky. This is why we see South Africa contending and trading back and forth with India over the course of the past 4 or 5 years for that coveted number 1 spot.
Yeah, thanks for that, Peter. Maybe just to add a little bit on there, I mean, the growth that we've seen over the last 4 to 5 years has actually been astounding in South Africa. You rightly outlined that Durban in the KwaZulu-Natal region is really just growing at a rate of knots, doing really, really well. The Western Cape, Cape Town is the most mature and established of the cities in South Africa. They have about 47% of the current export market. Joburg, or the state or province of Gauteng, where Joburg and Pretoria are, that has the largest domestic captive community. But as you rightfully say, we're seeing more and more of the international seats looking at setting up there. And then the focus from a South African perspective has been, and I think this is where I enjoy watching what the likes of India is doing, and really quite honored actually to be sitting in the same zone as India and Philippines in terms of the respondents, but looking at what Philippines has done and trying to learn from that. So a big focus that the country and the sector has, working with partners like the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and social partners like Harambee, is how do we ensure that we don't overheat any one environment? How do we ensure that the BPOs that are coming in and the growth that's happening is happening across the country? So looking at areas like the Eastern Cape, where we have 2 phenomenal cities, Gqeberha and East London, and there's been a lot of focus from local government to really grow those regions, great little BPO parks that are there. And I've seen a lot of interest from BPOs that are either looking at South Africa, but more so those that are already established, enjoying what they've secured in the country and looking to expand. So where are they going to expand? And they're looking at the tier 2 regions, which is super exciting. So certainly the Silver Cup, second place, is nothing to be sneezed at. I'm very proud of the country and the sector.
It is nothing to be sneezed at. And I think that something that really should be brought out is the extent to which we know how South African operators have prioritized the United States and Canada over the course of the past 4 or 5 years. And, you know, the results are there to prove it. #1 with a bullet.
Yeah, and UK is our most mature client. Around about 57% of the market servicing the international market is the UK. That has declined from 66%, but the numbers have grown. So the percentage decline is not a bad thing. Our fastest growing market is actually the United States, currently sitting at about 27%. And as we all know, it's a massive potential market. Interesting though, in your report, that was one of the markets that is least outsourcing, if I recall correctly, of the responding markets. Yet, I mean, even if they're not outsourcing at scale, it's still such a massive market. But do you see that shifting going forward?
Well, you know, the reality is in the United States, there is always going to be an impetus against using outsourcing on the surface. The reality of when you actually start looking at how the numbers work, it's a very different kettle of fish. And when you consider the fact that in the United States, doing some of this type of work can be in the range salaries well in excess of, you know, $25, $30 for an outsourced agent per hour. We're even hearing in some parts you could be seeing a captive having to spend something in the range of nearly 40. It just makes sense to find a BPO partner that you can work with, and preferably one that's going to be able to drive value. If they can't do it onshore, then they'll be looking at different offshore locations in which this work can be taken care of.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think again, or not I think, I know, I've seen that as the client community from the US has started working in South Africa, they've realized that actually there are direct flights. It's quite a quick hop and skip over through to South Africa. It's not as far away as what, or to Africa actually, is what many think. So we definitely are seeing growth there and meeting some phenomenal Americans along the way, which is exciting. So Peter, I think from a final learning question perspective, we're thrilled with where we are, but we always want to do better. So from a South Africa perspective, what can South Africa do differently, more of, less of, in order to regain our first place position in 2024? Yes, 2024.
Keep the visibility about the country's value proposition up. Make sure that the value proposition is incorporating the new technologies and the new functionalities that the clients in the sourcing markets are demanding. I would also say ensuring a level of professionalism when presenting to sourcing markets and potential clients in sourcing markets is going to be essential as well. Don't go in with the year mess for less approach. Go in with, we are a quality destination with a great track record, servicing clients from around the world in different sectors and doing it to the highest level of quality as possible, whether it's on the voice side or the digital side. That's what's going to count. And I would just say something South Africa has been very good at is keeping up that level of promotion and making sure that that level of awareness is constantly being driven is going to be just essential.
No, fantastic, Peter. Thank you for that. And I mean, from a BPESA perspective, I know we work very closely again with our partners, but equally with our members, and not only the BPOs, with a lot of our vendors that are supporting those very BPOs, wanting to see their success, wanting to go and help them engage with the client and explain around the property availability, the skills and staffing, the connectivity. So we're seeing a really phenomenal community working together. We all truly do believe that there is enough for everybody. We have world-class operators, both global operators and BPOs that have decided to set up in South Africa. Many of them have been asked by their clients to set up here, but equally we have a lot of homegrown quality operators that are here as well, that are also starting to really scale. So it's super exciting times for the country and for the continent. And I'd like to say thank you so much. It's really from the report really helps us to hone in on certain areas. The insights that you bring to the fore through the respondents, giving you some insights into what they're looking for, and the way that you actually package the knowledge for us is really valuable to the community, the global community. And I know that South Africa certainly likes to take a few pages out of the book and learn from it. So hugely appreciative of your time and sharing some of the insights with us. If somebody wants to get hold of the report, what do they need to do? Where do they need to go?
Very easy. All you need to do is go to my website, ryanadvisory.com. Click on the contact details and you will find a free form that you can fill out. Let me know that you're interested in purchasing the report and I'll get straight back to you.
Fantastic, Peter. Thank you so much as always for your time. Wishing you all the best in your visit to Toronto and look forward to seeing you on the next engagement and hopefully in South Africa.
You bet. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Brilliant. Thank you, Peter.